Hey guys, I'm back with another video, and today I'll be going over how I revised for A-level history and how I went from a B to an A star and how you can too. So without further ado, let's get on with the video. So as I always say in my A-level videos, you want to create a revision plan, and to do this you need to look at your specification. So I did Edexcel for history A-level. I went onto the website, looked at the specification to remind myself of the three studies that I did, and then I split those into subtopics so that I could actually visualize what I could be tested on. So I did Britain, democracy, protest and reform. That was my depth study. Then I did Italian unification, breadth. Then I did Germany, united, divided, reunited as my depth and breadth study. And obviously for the Britain paper, I had section C, which was abolition of the slave trade, right? So for the Britain paper, you have it split into four like subtopics. You have like the democracy part, like 1832 Reform Act. Then you have like factory reforms and then industrialization.
Then you have trade unions and cooperatives, and then you have like poverty and the poor law, right?
And that just really helped me like visualize, okay, that's just basically what I need to revise. Make a list of these on a piece of paper and actually just write out like, you know, each topic, subtopic that you need to revise. There's a 3-step process to revising. So number 1, learn your content. I didn't actually use much of my class notes to learn, well, you know, relearn the content. You know, I used my textbook. From that, I would make like mind maps. Let's say the poverty topic, you had like the limitations of the old poor law, and you had like causes of the new poor law, significance of the new poor law, like if it actually worked. And then you also had like changing attitudes to poverty. It was just a lot. So on one side of A4, I just wrote about the changing attitudes towards poverty, okay? And then I split it up into like the scandals that caused the changing attitudes. Then I added like
actual individuals through like their books and their philanthropy that changed the public attitudes, and I also did like actual charities.
Second step of this is to create essay plans. My teachers like actually gave us example like a list of example essay questions that we could get. So like, to what extent was X the primary cause of the 1832 Reform Act? You want to get an A4 sheet of paper, write your exam question, essay question at the top, and then in the margins write intro and briefly, literally just list the 3 factors you're going to include. So popular pressure, change from above, economic context. I didn't actually like write a stated factor. I just put X for the stated factor. I didn't actually decide on one because, you know, I might change my mind like throughout this revision. This is where you actually have to kind of be selective about what evidence you use. Evidence, you got to think, A, will I actually remember this? B, will it effectively back up my point, and like will it sort of convince the examiner? I'd honestly recommend doing just 2 pieces of evidence per paragraph. I think the mistake that I made before was trying to fit 3 pieces of evidence to show off my knowledge, but then that actually was a weakness on my part because I just didn't have enough time at the end, and I always struggled with timing. Revision actually underwent some drafts. Like initially I was thinking, yeah, I'm going to use Days of May, Bristol riots and the BPU as my 3 pieces of evidence. Then I realized, you know what, BPU is actually not as significant as the Days of May and the Bristol riots. So that's why I put a star next to Days of May and Bristol riots, right? Another thing that I did in these essay plans is that because this is a relative significance kind of question, you know, you want to be able to link the factors together, was actually compare each factor to each other. So not in this essay, but in another essay, yeah, I would just literally compare like 2 factors together. And so in total you'd have 3 comparisons. You'd have 1 to 2, 1 to 3, 2 to 3, because you don't know what the stated factor will actually be, but you need to be able to argue for every stated factor that could possibly come up. You need to know your factors so well. This is what I'm talking about. Conclusion. I compared Austrian strength to port organization, Austrian strength to lack of foreign support, poor organisation to lack of foreign support. And then I literally just wrote a line for each. Just you can keep it concise. It's basically saying Austrian strength was more significant than poor organisation in causing the failure, because revolutionaries still managed to set up provisional governments, but Austria intervened successfully every time. So basically I was saying like poor organisation was less significant, because there were times when the revolutionaries were actually organised, but even if they were organised, right, Austria still managed to crush them every time. Okay, third step, actually write your essays now, and preferably in time conditions. At least when it's study leave, do it in time conditions, because you're going to be tested in time conditions. What I actually did, I went on the internet and I did like a random like name generator, and I actually just typed in like each possible question I could get. I actually took pictures of them and I sent them by email to my teachers to mark. Yeah, the feedback that they gave me really helped me to improve. Top tips for actually writing good essays. So in your introduction, you want to firstly give context, kind of, you know, describe like what the actual heck is going on, because imagine you're describing to a 5-year-old who doesn't know anything about Italian unification or something. Do not spend longer than like 2 sentences on that, right? And then define the key terms. If there's any like very specific like terminological, don't know if that's a word, vocabulary in the question, then define it. What does it mean? Okay, so like risorgimento, let's say risorgimento was in the question. What is risorgimento? Define that. Okay, it's literally just like breaking down the question. That's essentially the introduction. And then plus you want to list your 3 potential factors. You have to quickly like make a reference to the stated factor, like yes, okay, yeah, this X was important. But if you don't actually truly believe that, I would recommend you could also add, yes, this was important, but arguably this other factor was more important, because now, bam, you have showed the examiner that you have an argument, okay, and you are going to lead with this argument. Amazing. But in the first paragraph, hold your horses. You've got to start with the stated factor. Because you want to say, yeah, the stated factor was significant. Start off with that topic sentence, and then give your 2 pieces of evidence, explain how they made that factor significant and how that led to the event or caused the event. And then obviously you want to bring it back in the concluding sentence. Yeah, like this stated factor was like significant. Second paragraph, try to link your stated factor to your next factor. This helps where like your knowledge comes in. You can see how these factors like interlinked, right? And now you can say, now arguably this factor was actually the most important. You can say that if you believe that, right? 2 evidence, and then concluding not just sentence, like I'd say 2 or 3 sentences to conclude in that paragraph, where you link that second factor to the stated factor and you compare which one was more significant. Do the same with the third paragraph. You link the second factor to the third factor. You concluding sentences, so yeah, 2 or 3, even 4 if you want, because conclusions are very important. To compare the third factor to the stated factor. Conclusion, start with the stated factor. You say popular pressure was the stated factor. Popular pressure was important for causing the 1832 Reform Act, because it 2 to 3 sentences about that, and then be like, however, it was less important than which was actually the most significant factor in causing the 1832 Reform Act, because and then you also want to link in the third factor. Do not forget about the third factor. See how that plays in. Was the third factor more important than the stated factor, or less important than the stated factor? And also you want to link that third factor to your second factor as well. So you essentially, you want to link all the factors together. Your conclusion should actually be quite long. Like, I'm literally saying like half a page. Like, your conclusion should not be 3 lines. Everything is at stake with this conclusion, because it's the last thing that your examiner reads. It ties everything in together. It really hones in your argument. Is what leaves the lasting impression on the examiner. Read the essays where it's like the social change and the like possibility of questions you could get was much wider, much bigger than for the depth questions, you know? So you got to be prepared for anything. Instead of even comparing like factors or events to each other, you had to compare like actual time periods. So like, let's say, oh, Nazi Germany was the period where the most significant economic change happened, and you could be like, yeah, okay, it was, but then you also have to compare to 2 other time periods. So I would have compared to like the Adenauer period and like Bismarck off the top of my head. In the intro, you need to say how you're going to judge the significance of it. You need to define your criteria. So my teacher recommended us to do like 3 types of criteria. So long-term versus short-term, profound versus superficial, and then narrow versus widespread, to determine like how significant a certain thing was. Obviously the way of revising for section G is the exact same. Make the mind maps, you know, learn from your textbook. No, I did not make essay plans because there's only one possible essay question that you could get. Is like, the main question is just what was the most significant factor for causing the abolition of the slave trade. It's really helpful to, you don't even have to necessarily always write out your essays for the source question, but just time yourself, give yourself like 10 minutes to look at the source and annotate it. Read it, underline it, add annotations where you actually bring in like the wider evidence. Keep interrogating the source. Like, think of it as you're interrogating the source, and to show like why you should be trusted in interrogating the source is by bringing in your own knowledge, aka what you learn in the textbook, your wider context. Okay, yes, it is about showing off your knowledge and your wider knowledge, but that's not the whole point of it. Like, you need to bring that in as a sort of like backup to back up your point. Like, you know, let's say, yeah, in the source it says, yeah, banks were going bankrupt, and you can be like, yeah, this can be backed up by, actually say this can be corroborated, this can be backed up by the fact that 12 merchant houses went bankrupt in Liverpool. And obviously explain like, so yeah, this shows that, you know, people were seeing slave trade was no longer profitable, added to the economic argument, Always explain the evidence that you use, okay? If you want to say the opposite of backed up, it's like, this can be undermined by, you know, if like you don't actually believe in what a particular source is saying, one of the evidences it uses, it's like, this is actually not so true. Like, and for that essay, you do intro, 2 paragraphs, 1 for source 1, 1 for source 2, and then your conclusion. In your second paragraph, when you're dealing with the second source, actually link back to the source 1. So like, maybe source 2 might actually be stronger in source 1 in some aspects. So you say like, yeah, this highlights this, as opposed to source 1 where it doesn't actually like highlight that. You know, this is, you know, severely like understated in source 1, or this is completely left out in source 1 as opposed to in source 2, where this is like given more emphasis. And obviously that you would bring in like your wider context. My best tip for these source essays, keep your intro really short, like arguably even shorter than for your 3-factor questions. As I've said in the section C essay, you gotta bring in like external knowledge, not to show off, but to like back up your point. And then explain. Okay, for the Italy source question, so like, how far could a historian like make use of both sources for an inquiry into so your Barrett study one. You don't have to use introduction, actually. Make sure that you actually, in the conclusion, compare the two, because the actual question is how, you know, how could a historian use both of these? Is there one source that's more significant than the other? And like, obviously in your 2 paragraphs, you would have, you know, outlined like, maybe like why this source is like strong in this aspect, but maybe also not as like strong or like useful in this aspect. You could do this in like both source essays, but like compare the 2 sources or 2 inquiries to each other in your conclusion. Yeah, I really hope that this was helpful. Leave any questions in the comments that you have, and I'll try my best to answer them. But anyway, hope you enjoyed. Give this a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.